Guys, it's Kwana back again for another video, and this time I am doing a recap and a review of American Horror Stories episode 3 entitled Drive-In. This episode stars Renzi Felice, who I loved and adored in the Marvel series Runaways, which aired on Hulu and got tragically canceled after season 3. I think it was season 3. Did we make it all the way to season 3? And was very distraught by that. It also stars Madison Bailey, and there's a couple of guest appearances from some HS alumni. We have Naomi Grossman making an appearance, and John Carroll Lynch, who I love and adore. He's great in everything that he does. And the setting of this episode is the drive-in. I remember the very last time that I went to a drive-in movie, it was to see Pet Sematary. I was 7, and I feel like this goes hand in hand, and the concept for this episode was such a good concept. I don't think that it was completely executed in the right way, but it definitely reconfirmed some thoughts that I had from watching the first 2 episodes, that this is definitely more teen geared. It's going to be lighter in tone, so we shouldn't expect the outcomes to be quite the same as we would in a traditional American Horror Story series. And that being the case, it makes me really wish they had changed the name to something else, because I don't feel like this should reside totally in the realm of American Horror Story. Like, I kind of wish they had just said it was a spinoff, but at the same time, let those things be simply Easter eggs and not direct references, especially from like episodes 1 and 2. Like, they were so heavily literal in the world of American Horror Story, instead of it just being kind of like a parallel universe kind of situation that was happening. Guys, just an alert. I am going to be giving spoilers for American Horror Stories episode 3 entitled Drive-In during this review. And so this is a full-on review and recap with spoilers. So if you haven't had an opportunity to watch the episode yet, do me a favor and click the like button and the subscribe button for notifications. Pause this video, go watch the episode, come back for my recap, okay? Thanks. But anyhow, let's go ahead and recap the episode. So we meet Chad and Kelly, who are celebrating their 6-month anniversary watching some Bob Ross. Given the nature that they were making out by watching Bob Ross, like, who's going to be making out while watching Bob Ross? Going to sleep while watching Bob Ross, most definitely. That is some great ASMR. But like making out to Bob Ross, no. And I kind of kept waiting for like them to do some type of weird CGI where Bob Ross kind of like said like, "Hey, you're looking good there, kiddo," or something like that at the screen. But, you know, he didn't do that. And anyway, Kelly's not ready to go all the way with Chad. Chad is, you know, doing the thing that boys do where he's kind of shaming her into trying to have sex with him, and it doesn't work, and they have a big fight. When he meets up with his skater buddy friends in the park, they start to talk about, like, why were you watching Bob Ross? So he was hoping to kind of lull her into a relaxed state, give her some endorphins kind of situation. He's like, no, you got to go the horror route for that, which pulls in the whole trope of, like, you know, the guy and the girl at the horror movie, you know, getting it on or what have you, you know, takes me back to watching Thriller with Michael Jackson. And so one of his friends says, well, guess what? I've bought tickets to a drive-in with this really, really infamous murderous film that caused everybody to go psycho and crazy, and we're going to go watch it. Pause. Like, one, I felt like while the beginning introduces us to our main couple, it was like the lead into all of this was a huge waste of time, because it didn't really seem like Chad was all that interested, and he seemed skeptical from jump, and he didn't seem like he was like this major you know, film buff aficionado, and it seemed like his friends were, and it just didn't feel like there was a premise for that, and that knowledge wasn't used in any way later on in the show. So I kind of felt like we could have met these people at the drive-in, started the night at the drive-in, spent some time with them, like while they're waiting for the movie to appear, getting to know them, having Kelly talking to Dee about, you know, what she's hoping for tonight. And I don't think that the beginning of it was needed at all. I mean, I guess there was a bigger conversation they were trying to have about the influence that television has on people by saying like Bob Ross lulls you into this sense of relaxation, da 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 da. But I feel like that conversation came so much later that it wasn't necessary early on. So that's just a stylistic thing that I wish they wouldn't have wasted that time, and they could have spent more time really building up the suspense of the evening. When they finally go to the drive-in, that's where we meet Natalie Grossman's character. She's a protester who was there in the original screening of the movie. She's missing an eye, and she's pleading with people to go back. You're gonna die. And of course, no one's listening to her but Chad. Chad is the only one who's kind of like, antennas up. And the night begins. Dee hooks up with one of Chad's friends. Dee is one of Kelly's friends. And Kelly and Chad are in their car making out, and things are getting hot and heavy when all of the madness ensues. The movie turns everyone into like murderous zombie creatures, and they start tearing people's flesh and killing people and ripping their flesh out. And, you know, then of course, I knew it was coming, so I was only waiting for it to happen, where eventually Dee, who's looking at the movie through like the crack in the steering wheel, goes crazy and bites off, I can't remember the guy's name, I'm so sorry, but bites off his schlong. And I was waiting for it to happen. I knew the gag was going to come. And I think because I was waiting for it to happen, and it was so overtly going to happen, that it was humorous to some degree, but it also wasn't quite as effective. Like, it would have made more sense, especially given that they had kind of had a conversation about like Dee never feeling this way, that they had gone with a less sexualized, heavily overt sexualized premise there, and had gone with more of like a build-up. And then, you know, we see Chad and Kelly trying to get it on, celebrating their 6-month anniversary, and then we go to the car where Dee is, and it's random. Like, it's a random thing that happens, and we didn't know that it was going to happen, or something like that. The way that it happened just kind of felt too forced. It felt like too tropey. Let's make the queer person overtly sexual without any boundaries kind of person, and I didn't really like that. That was just me personally. But because Chad and Kelly are going so hot and heavy in the car is all fogged up. They don't see anything of the movie, and so they are the only ones who aren't turned into these vapid zombies, and everyone else is killing each other. And they run into the film booth. Now, in the film booth, we have Natalie Grossman's character. She goes there to try to stop it, and she's attacked by the drive-in owner, who then attacks her employee. And by the time Chad and Kelly get there, everyone is dead, pretty much on the floor. And they're trying to figure out what the heck is going on when they realize that it's the movie. They have to fight off the they have to fight off the protester, who's now become a zombie herself. Or was it the drive-in movie worker? It was a big blur. It was a big blur of a fight scene. Fight off the drive-in movie worker, kill them. And just when you think perhaps like they have both seen enough where Chad is going to turn, Chad doesn't turn. Kelly finds a shotgun. They realize what's happened. Chad passes out. And when Chad wakes up, they're like arguing over where they're going to get help or not. There are about like 300 or 400 people dead at this drive-in. They argue about whether to go get help. They decide that the police are not going to believe them. And so they decide to take matters into their own hands and hunt down the director and get any additional copies of the movie so they can destroy them. And so they go off and they hunt. I did not mind that turn, but the events at the drive-thru happened so quickly that you don't get to live in the, horror space of it all for very long. And that's another reason why I wish they had just started the show off at the drive-through the drive-in built up the suspense, spend a little bit of time of them trying to get away from, you know, the zombie people, and then, you know, take us over to the director. But we very quickly get to the director's house, and there's no cops to stop Chad and Kelly from getting there. Surprise, surprise. And they meet Larry Bitterman. Okay, so that name is obvious, right? He's a very bitter man. It reminds me of Death of a Salesman, Willie Loman, right? And he basically tells them the history of how he put this movie together. He doesn't really talk about what his ultimate goal was. He does go into detail about how he did it and how he worked on The Exorcist, and how The Exorcist used 2 clips of a demon in order to impact people in the audience, and people were vomiting and someone gave birth, and all of these different things, basically giving us a history of the way that film impacts its audience and how he kind of came to figure this out. And then there's this weird flashback where he is standing in trial and Tipper Gore is there, and Tipper Gore, like the Tipper Gore, like Al Gore's wife, is who I'm assuming that it's supposed to be. And it's kind of an alternate reality type situation where she's like he attacks her. And I just thought, oh wow, Tipper Gore, you know, like who is like an LGBT advocate and all of this, like, okay, maybe there's like some history that I don't know about because of my age that I need to do some deeper dives into. But anywho, he attacks Tipper Gore, gets 15 years, which is why his movie has been shelved for so long. And eventually, Chad and Kelly find or get the extra copies, burn them, kill him or shoot him in the kneecaps, and leave him to burn in his trailer. And they defeat and save the day. Now, I was kind of okay with that ending. I wish that they had leaned a little bit more heavily into the fact that, like, perhaps the movie, they had seen just enough of it to make them a little bit psychotic, and kind of lean more heavily into, like, the kind of crazy that we see from Scarlet, like that this is going to be like a thing that they're going to do from now on, versus they just go back to their normal lives and become kids again. But like, literally, like, all their friends are dead. So like the next scene that we see them making out in his house, it just feels like really weird that like they're just back to normal, especially because we don't give any sense of like how much time has really passed. But then of course, you know, the big moment that happens is we see the Netflix screen is up, and suddenly, you know, 12 o'clock hits. You know, if you've ever been on Netflix at a certain time, they'll roll out all that new material, and we see that the movie Rabbit has been released on Netflix, and ideally it's going to be streamed across the world, so everyone is going to become murderous zombies, thereby starting our very own zombie apocalypse in the AHS universe. I like it. I like a good zombie show, you know, Walking Dead, Black Summer. I love those things. I just, again, I go back to the idea of like, I really wish they weren't setting this in AHS, because everything in AHS is somewhat interconnected, and it's all somewhat happening within the same universe, and they haven't yet established like alternate timeline kind of situation. So in that regards, it's like, oh, there's the zombie apocalypse, the world's gonna be over. This can't have been like a long way away into the future, because they talk distinctly about 1986 being the year that the movie first premiered. So even if he was, say, like Larry Bitterman was, say, like 25 or 30 when that happened, it's only been a good 30 years. Like, it's very, I felt very much firm that it was set during like our current year. And so I just wish that like it was kind of a little bit better established that this was like, these are its own separate universes, you know, like not connected together, because so much of AHS has been connected. And so that's kind of weird, you know, that they haven't done that. And so that go back to the idea of like, and also we have another somewhat happy ending. I mean, yes, you have the impending zombie apocalypse, so you know, like they really didn't do much, but we don't see it So for our two main players, I mean, as of right now, it was a happy ending. They were getting their jollies off. I mean, hey, at least they got one in before, you know, all was said and done. But but it's such a different tone from American Horror Story that I really, really, really wish they had chosen a different name or just called it Teen American Horror Story or something, or American Horror Story Next Generation, or I don't know, something. Let me know down below in the comments what would have been a better name for this anthology series other than just calling it American Horror Stories, because I still feel like that's a bit of a miss. Let me know what you thought of this episode. I actually liked the episode. Again, I'm a big fan of Renzi, so I really liked seeing him on my screen again. It really made me miss Runaways. But aside from that, I mean, I felt like it was a good episode for what it was. I, in many ways, liked it better than episodes 1 and 2, simply because episode 2 so derailed episode 1 for me that I liked episode 1, but then episode 2 derailed it. And so I liked this episode. Tonally, I liked it. I just wish that they had made some better storytelling choices to make it a bit scarier. But other than that, I liked this episode. So yeah, those are my thoughts about American Horror Stories, episode 3, Drive-In. And I will see you guys at the next one. Toodles.